Hey guys, welcome back to the Guitar Institute. Today I want to talk about getting great electric tone direct. So this is something that you probably have wanted to do. It's a lot simpler, especially if you have a house studio setup. You like to record at home, you don't have to fire up amps, you can just go direct in. It's something that is really tempting, and we all wish that it was better than it actually was. And there's a lot of products out there on the market, a lot of amp plugins, a lot of different stuff like the Kemper, there's the Helix. Those are like the two big ones that people are using. For me, I want to take today and not talk less about theory. I think over the course of the Guitar Institute, we've been talking a lot about big concepts, and I've been training how to go after something using the gear that you already have by changing your mindset about whatever it is I'm teaching about. Well, today, when you talk about direct guitar tone, it's a lot trickier because it's 100% dependent on whatever the software is that you're using, whether it's a hardware box like a Kemper or it's software in your computer. Whatever it is, it's just dependent on that. You're at the mercy of that. So I've tried a lot of different products, and today I want to show you my favorite products. So this is basically a product demo today. And the great thing about this product is that it's really inexpensive. You can get this entire setup for $150. So you don't have to break the bank account, you can get great tone, and I just want to show you what I use. So this is a amp plugin that I use for recording whenever I'm at home in my home studio. I want to work from home, people hire me to play on a record, I use these exact settings and this exact setup on my computer, and it costs $150. I also wanted to include in this lesson, just for a download for you Helix players and the Kemper players, my personal amp profiles and my Helix patches. So what I did was I grabbed the Helix from our local church, and I went through it and I got all the presets that I think are great, and I just want to make them available to you for free, part of this institute. Same thing with the Kemper. We own a couple of Kempers. I've tried to use them. The thing about the Kempers that I've found is a little tricky is when you start stacking overdrives, it tends to not really react in the way that I want it to react. I think the Kemper is better used with the onboard effects that you use with the Kemper. I just never fully switched over to that and committed to that. I wanted to still use my pedal board because I'm always in different situations. So the Kemper wasn't a big win for me, but it does make really, really great amp profiles. And I made 3 profiles. I made my Vox AC30, my favorite amp, my Bad Cat Luca, which is basically modeled after my Vox AC30. So you have those 2 profiles, and then my other favorite amp, which is the Britain 4.0, Jackson Ampworks Britain 4.0. I play a lot of different amps, but those are my favorite 3. So those 3 profiles are now in your folder here in this course, in the Thinkific course. So, all right, we're gonna jump over to some screen grab. I'm gonna go over to Ableton Live like I usually do, and today we're gonna talk about this product called the Chandler, and I'm going to show you all about how I use it and my exact settings, and you can go home, you can buy it, and you'll be set up to go for recording at home. Okay, here we are inside Ableton Live as the usual. You'll see my voice is over here on the right, audio 4, and then I have this channel set up. So it's called lead, and I have electric, one side of my electric and the other side. So what I'm doing is I'm coming out of my pedal board stereo, and that way I can use, it's serving 2 purposes. One is that I can use the stereo effects from my pedal board, so like my delay is sending out stereo into the computer, and then the other purpose is that I can use 2 setups of this Chandler plugin with different settings on each side. So what I'm trying to do, what my thought process was, that I'm mimicking using 2 different amps. So I'm going to work backwards right now. I'm going to show you what the final product sounds like, and then I'm going to show you how I got there. So So right now that's just with only a compressor on my pedal board. I think the first rule about getting good direct tone is that you have to think about it differently than you would think about it getting great tone from an amp. And I don't mean that like you're trying to get a different sound than you would be getting from an amp. That's, you know, the opposite is true. You're trying to get as close to a real amp sound as possible, but the means of getting there is often different because we're working with a digital product. So I'm not often looking for like a ton of great drive tone from the actual amp modeler itself. Sometimes I'm using more pedal drive, especially like with products that don't sound as good as the channelers. Then I'll have to like mold my pedals to make it work. Often when you're gaining up into an input source like into, you know, just your direct into the computer, and you're driving the product, like the channeler, when you're driving the product harder with your pedals, sometimes it craps out. That's what I was talking about with the Kemper. It just kind of gets weird when you stack drives into it. It starts getting more and more digital sounding. What we're trying to do is get away from the digital sound. We're trying to get a big natural full sound. Anyway, I said this was a product demo. I'm just gonna show you the product, show you how much I love it. I am not sponsored by Chandler, by the way. This is not a product plug. This is just me saying, this is the best one I've tried. This is the best one I found. Producers seem to love it when I send them stuff. So let's go one channel at a time. I'm gonna mute this side right here, and I'm just gonna go straight up with my panning on one side. And let me turn off my reverb, hold on. It's right there. Okay. Let's turn off everything I have going on in post. So starting from the beginning here, the only thing I have going into the channeler is a high pass filter right at about 125. All right, so this is inside the channeler. Let's try and turn that up so you can hear it a little more. You can see it looks a lot like just a regular amp. You know, I'm going to take a screenshot right here while we're at it. So this first screenshot in your folder will be of number 1, my settings on number 1. When you go over here, this is where you choose your different mics. So you can choose all these different mics for the cabinet. I just chose, instead of going through all of them, I just found the first one that sounded most like a 57, because you guys know I use 57s. But you know, if you change to a ribbon, it would be darker. Change to a condenser. For me, it's the number 2. And then this input, so again, I'm not driving very hard. I've only got a compressor on my pedal board, and it's got all these different settings down here. I just kind of set treble at 1, bass at 2, input right at that point of breakup that I try and find even on amps. You know, clean. Okay, so my amp sounds good. I've got a big, nice, full sound. A lot of times with digital input, products like this, you end up getting weird frequencies. So you want to look at your frequency meter and see if anything's spiking. I'm gonna even pop this over here to post and see if anything's coming up. So I'm just looking for anything that's spiking right here in the EQ, which it doesn't look like it is. All right, I'm gonna turn a compressor on, and that's basically just to make it a little bit louder and give it some more sustain. let's go over to the other side now. So I'm going to mute that side. I'm going to pan it back to the left. Let's try electric 2. Sorry, they're both called electric 2. Turn off the compressor, pull up the channeler. All right, so over here we have, looks like we have another 57, just a different number. So it's number 65. And my EQ settings over here are a lot different. You'll see I don't have the treble boost on. I have bass and treble straight up. And that's just because I want a different sort of sound. And at the end of the day, running 2 of the exact same processors side by side like this doesn't make a true stereo signal. It's actually more like you're double miking the amp. Double miking one amp because it's kind of all the same processing inside, but you get a wider sound than you would if you just use one mic or just one of the channels and then put reverb on at the end or something like that. It does end up sounding wider, especially if you're using a stereo delay from your pedal board. So I don't really like delays from the computer. I like to put the delay into the digital amp instead of putting the delay after the digital amp. I find that like when you're delaying, it ends up sounding truer and nicer when you're driving the amp with the actual delays instead of just repeating whatever the amp did at first. So this is what that sounds like with the compressor on. So just A being one side against the other, it should just sound a little bit different. Here's the other side. A little mid-rangier, a little bit more top end. They both sound real voxy though, which is what I love. Together. And then panned out. All right, and then we go over here to my master bus for that channel. So I'm gonna put another EQ on to high pass it just to get rid of that low funk. Here it is without. You can hear it just cleans it up real nice. Then I'm going to open up my favorite Verb. This is a Valhalla vintage Verb. I have the low cut at 450, which is pretty crucial with reverb to get rid of that low junk. You can hear it just came to life. Valhalla makes great reverbs for guitar. Even more lifelike sounding. And then I'm going to put a compressor on at the very end, and you can see all my compressor settings just to make sure it's all being grabbed and held onto. With some delay. Let's test this now with some drive pedals. So I think the reason that I love this channeler so much is because I think it takes drive pedals pretty well. I'm just going to cycle through my drives just to show you that. Turning off my delay now, here's the little green wonder with my normal settings. Now you can hear the clean is a little bit better than the dirty. Once you start adding dirt into digital, it just ends up sounding more and more digital. So a lot of times when I'm tracking with the channeler, I try and save it for like cleaner guitar parts, and I kind of just go a different route with my overall process. I don't end up playing on the tracks with a ton of dirt, because I'm trying to mask the fact that I'm using a digital platform. So just be aware of that as you're stacking drives into digital. It tends to get more digital sounding. unless you really tweak it and you find something that works. Here's the super bolt. Back to the Little Green Wonder. Super bolt. And then the wrap. So that's all 3 drives. Those are my settings inside of the Chandler. Let me show you one more thing. I think I've showed you this before, but here is another one of my favorite verbs. It's the shimmer. Let's drop that in. This is a really cool effect to use sometimes when you're, especially when you're going direct in, because you can get really great compressed, clean tones direct that you can't get normally with an amp. It almost reminds me of like what I think maybe Johnny Buckland would do. I wouldn't even be surprised if they do a lot of their guitars digital because of how similar it sounds to like the Ghost Stories records or something like that. So yeah, that is direct in. I don't end up using the Big Sky reverb on my pedal board very often when I'm going direct in. Here's the difference between that. Here's a Big Sky, just a normal verb on my Big Sky. And then turning that off and then mimicking that with the vintage verb that I have on Valhalla. So that's verb in the box. Here's verb from my pedal. What about heavier verb? So here's heavy verb from the Big Sky. And then heavy verb from in the box. You guys get the point. I think it's cool to do post reverb when you're going direct, and so I end up doing that more often. And then especially with the regular rhythm verb, the short verbs, it can sound really great just going with a little bit of vintage Valhalla after the fact instead of putting your Big Sky through the amp modeler, because again, the more you put into the modeler, the more it's going to sound digital. All right, guys, that's it for Guitar Institute this week. You can have all my settings. You can have everything that I have in order to go make it sound great in your home studio. We'll see you here next week.